All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The VIP Voice with yours truly, Manny Cabo, with a very important question, I might add. So, have you ever looked around, right, and thought, man, something just isn't right, right? Or maybe you felt it in your gut or in an industry for that matter, even in a system, but didn't know exactly how to call it out. Or, here's one for you. Were you afraid of the blowbacks, the criticisms, the trolls coming out of the woodwork? Because I've been there. And today's guest, she's also been there. And she's made it her mission to speak up and show up for all of us who felt that way. And I'm hyped, believe me, beyond hyped to welcome Cristina Escobar to the show. In my opinion, since I first saw her speak on stage, I thought of her as a true change maker. Right. So just to give you a little background, she's a director of communications and marketing for Esperanza United, co-founder and editor-in-chief of Latina Media Co, a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic for all you movie buffs out there. So you know her word is bond, right? And a board member of the Latino Entertainment Association. And like I said, she's an overall badass when it comes to calling out injustice with style, right? You got to have style no matter what the hell you're doing now these days, right? Substance and, of course, facts. And I first caught, as I just briefly alluded to, I caught Cristina speaking up at the Latino Filmmakers Network event at Sundance Film Festival. We had such a blast. So goddamn cold, though, I will tell you that. But a big shout out to United Airlines for sponsoring that big and successful event, I might add. And I have to tell you, I was immediately drawn to her particular message because she talks about things that I sprinkle all over every single podcast episode, which is investing in yourself, right? And working with people who actually believe in your vision and your values. What a concept, right? Come on. And not waiting around for someone to save you, because honestly, no one's coming to save your dreams, your art, your culture. My dad used to say that shit all the time. What are you waiting for? You think someone's going to come out and be like, hey, Manny, we got you. It's not going to happen. I've learned it and implemented it in my entire teachings, from music to my podcasting to my speeches and presentations everywhere, because I feel that that's the backbone of everyone's individual success and the blockages as well. And not to mention, she's also backed up by the hard truth Latinos. So I want to mention something to you. This is pretty alarming, and she brought this to my attention. Now, Latinos, we make up, yes, I'm a Latino for those of you who don't know, we make up 20% of the U.S. population, but we only make up 3% of the opportunities in Hollywood. Dude, that's crazy. And it's also why conversations, specifically like this one, are very necessary. So we're just getting started, and when we come back, we're going to find out exactly what makes Cristina Escobar such a powerhouse in communications, in activism, in storytelling, and why her voice is changing the game for so many. Believe me, you're going to want to hear this. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the VIP Voice, the ultimate podcast where communication gets a serious upgrade. Hosted by yours truly, Manny Cabo. We'll be diving into tools, tricks, and techniques to level up your speaking game. And it doesn't matter whether you're in front of the mic, crowd, or just having that all-important one-on-one. Every episode brings real, raw, and inspiring stories from pros across all industries who are turning heads, breaking barriers, and showing up as their best selves. All here to help you do the same. So buckle up, because it's time to unleash your voice and make every word count. So let's get into it, and welcome to the VIP Voice.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And as I said before, buckle up, because it's about to get real bold and all the way forward. So without any further delay, let's welcome, you can hear her giggling in the background. Let's welcome to the show, Señorita Cristina Escobar. How are you, Cristina? So glad to have you.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you kidding me? It's an honor. I know. I heard the giggles throughout the background. You were underscoring every word that I had to say, but I'm glad you're having fun. And I know you've got some allergies that you're dealing with, and I know so am I. So believe me, I'll be gentle. Don't worry, I'll be gentle. This is all good. But seriously, it's good to have you here. My fan base is excited to have you on. And just like I was saying, I was so impressed with what you had to say. And remember, I didn't introduce myself. I just gave you my card. Yes, people still have cards. It's still,
I have a physical card. Yeah, for sure.
You have to, right? You got to go old school, especially when you're getting bombarded with questions and people are there. You don't want to take up your time. So we're going to get right into this. Okay. Is that okay with you?
That sounds great.
All right. So as I mentioned in your, I'd like to think it was a pretty thorough introduction. I hope I didn't miss anything, but you have so much shit going on that I wanted just to touch upon the important stuff that, that aligns with the message of the show. And you truly are. You're a powerhouse when it comes to communication and the hard truths. And so am I. I think that's why we resonate. And that's why I resonated with your message. And not just clearly, but I want to use the word commandingly. Is that a word? Well, if it's not, it's a word now because I'm trademarking it. It's commandingly, right? So in your opinion, what's the biggest mistake people make when, let's just say, trying to speak out about injustice and how can they say what needs to be said without losing their audience?
Yeah. So first, I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't speak out, right? A lot of people are quiet. They're quiet or they're hiding. I know that was part of my personal journey where I've been doing activism work forever, it seems like. But for a long time, I was only behind the scenes. I was always working at great organizations, doing great stuff, writing things, writing talking points, sometimes even ghostwriting for other people. But I wasn't speaking for myself. And I realized eventually that wasn't enough, that the world was not going to become the one I wanted it to be, the one where everybody has equal opportunity, everybody has a chance, and our systems are set up that way, unless people like me and like many of your listeners do start speaking up as who they are authentically, not hiding behind aspects of their identity or sometimes your professional career, but just really speaking from the heart.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Not to interject, but you mentioned a word there that is extremely important. You said show up authentically. That right there, I really wanted to highlight that because that, in my opinion, for me, I've gotten so many incredible opportunities because I was just myself. And it's so true. People are always concerned with, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? Like, who's to say what's wrong and right? But go ahead, continue.
Well, and you might. And hopefully you have people around you who can help guide you to saying the better thing next time and growing and learning. Like being perfect is not really a great goal. What is a good goal is to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep getting better and be more and more effective.
That's a great point. Yep.
Yeah. So what I think about in terms of communication is like, yes, you need to be fact-based. You need to use stats and you need to use numbers. You need to be an expert in what you're talking about. But once you have that, you kind of put it aside because you know that you are grounded and you have to stay up to date on it, but you can move with truth. And what actually changes people's hearts and minds are not numbers. They are stories that bring out the shared humanity, stories that show the real consequences of people's actions. And so that's what I try to do in my work, and specifically in my work as the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Latina Media Co, which is a really great indie publication that I suggest people check out. And we founded it because, as you mentioned in the intro, Latinos are so underrepresented when it comes to Hollywood.
You think?
We are not starring in films. We're not even appearing in them. We're certainly not writing, directing, and producing them with a few exceptions. The numbers are quite bad. And on top of that, we're not evaluating them. So I work to specifically invite Latina and queer Latinx folks to become cultural critics, to say, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, and why. And a big part of that work, speaking to your question about authenticity, is pushing back on some ideas that are longstanding in journalism. There's this idea that journalists are supposed to be objective. But I think that objective word is really just code for speaking from a white male perspective. Like, I don't think it's a real thing. I don't think so. And I would much rather read something where somebody owns from the beginning their subjectivity and says, I'm coming at it this way. I'm a parent or I'm not a parent. I liked this or I didn't like it. It reminded me of my childhood. It was totally foreign for me. Like, whatever it is, I want to know. And then I can decide as a reader if I am in the same boat as them or if I'm somewhere else and if I care. And that, to me, owning your subjectivity is a part of being authentic, and it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, and if you don't show up authentically, right, then what the hell's the point of saying it in the first place? But there's an epidemic about that stuff, And I find myself having certain conversations where someone will just say something to either just agree or they won't show up authentically, like we're just discussing here, and be like, well, I heard this or I heard that. But no, talk to me from your truth, speak your truth, and be I don't want to use the word objective, obviously, because obviously we know it has a negative connotation. But, come from it from a true, honest experience. Do an honest self-audit. Have you gone through this? Can you authentically represent what you're saying? And I see that a lot, a lot of misinformation because people are getting influenced just to follow the herd. Correct me if I'm wrong. And going back to what you were saying, which is another important point, facts just tell, stories sell, but the stories have to be from the heart and have to be from your experiences in walking your truth. So I completely agree, but go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that people repeat, and I really think it is true, is like if you're not telling your own story, someone else is going to tell it for you.
Absolutely.
And that is really my call to our community, to the Latino community, is like other people have been telling our stories and they have been misrepresenting us. They've been misrepresenting what it is to be an immigrant. They've been misrepresenting what it is to be a Latino woman, a Latino man, a queer Latino person. And we have to stop that. We have to step forward, even though we may be trained to not do that, to be quiet and good and wait in line and wait to be called on. The truth is that is not serving us. And so I really encourage folks to go out and tell their own stories, share their own opinions. Yes, use facts, be based in facts, but then come with it from where you are. We need so many more people's voices and so many different voices, because the fact is right now, it's a relatively privileged class who's writing movies, who's telling journalism, who's on TV,
Absolutely.
Who's got the mic. And so we have to seize it. And no one's going to give us permission, as you were mentioning earlier.
100%.
There is no white knight coming to save us. We have to do it for ourselves, and we have to do it now.
Yeah. You speak with such conviction and clarity. That's one thing I've loved about you since the first time I heard you speak, and that's something that a lot of speakers and leaders struggle. So that's my jam. Effective communication and presentation. Especially when the topics are emotional. And uncomfortable. Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you can give one piece of advice to anyone who feels like their voice doesn't matter, and obviously you encounter that on a daily basis, perpetually, whether they're stepping onto a stage or into a meeting or onto a film set, what would that be?
I think it's really important to be strengths-based. So a lot of times we focus on what's wrong with us, right? Like, what are our weaknesses? Oh, I'm not good at this. I don't like how I look at the camera. I say too much, whatever it is.
Right.
But what if instead you said, I love how I write. I'm actually a really good speaker. I'm good at a cocktail party, like whatever it is. And then you did more of that. Like, we don't all have to be everything all the time.
Sure.
You can actually focus on what you're good at and what you like. And I want to say, when you start to do that and you take those risks and you go out there, you might find that you get better at the other stuff too.
Sure.
Because when you're confident and you're investing in yourself, things kind of start to line up. It's a little bit of magic. I know that you've seen it, Manny. It's true, right?
If I had $1, let's just leave it at that. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say do some thinking about what you are good at, and then try to line up as much of that as is possible. And it's okay if it's different stuff, for sure.
I would hope it's different, because that's the misconception that we all have. When people tell me, well, I'm going to try this, but I'm afraid it's been done. Dude, in all honesty, let's compare it to music. That's my background. It's like you told me, well, I want to write this chord structure that's like, I'm like, Led Zeppelin wrote everything under the sun. So there's nothing that you could bring to the table that hasn't been done. However, there's a beautiful uniqueness to everyone out there. Just own that. Have an honest self-audit. What do you truly appreciate about whatever the hell you enjoy in life? And come from that space, because that not only will shed light on your authenticity, but you'll also build an audience, because you're not the only one that's going to feel that way. And sure, you'll have some people with opposing views, but who cares? Not everyone's going to like you. Hell, I don't even like everybody, so it's impossible. That's why it's so important to just forget about all the noise and just come correct and be yourself. And notice how we keep going back and reverting back to the word authentic. So part 2 of that question is, how do you personally reconnect with your own voice, with Cristina's voice, when the world tries to drown you out? And I'm sure you've been through that because I've been through it.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it took a big leap to step out and use my voice. I talk about it in my TED Talk, where I had definitely, as a young person, as a young woman in particular, internalized a lot of the messages that nothing I could say would ever be good enough. I could never write anything as great as the great writers who I so admired and was reading in literature classes, so I shouldn't even try. And that is a useless message. And I had to learn to throw it out. And, my parents had always encouraged me. Like, there were other places I could have been listening to, and I just wasn't. And so I personally felt called by, I'm going to go ahead and name it. It was the first Trump administration. I was like, how did we get here? Was it because people like me were silent? Maybe we weren't loud enough. Maybe we weren't speaking our truths enough so that our fellow citizens know what it's like on the ground to be us. So I stepped forward, I started talking about that, and I started using my own voice. And yes, I definitely got a lot of rejections, for sure. I learned some hard stuff. But I want to say too, when I ruffle feathers, I'm always a little nervous about it. I am. I'm still always nervous about it when I write, say, a negative review, because I know people, as a movie critic, for example, people spend years of their lives on these artistic projects, and some of them are money grabs, sure, but some of them really people pour their heart and souls into, and they're a huge team effort, and nobody's making one decision. And so I really think consciously about it. And when I write a negative review, I'm very clear about if I'm punching up or punching down and why I'm making that critique, and not so much whether a movie is good or not, because I think quality is boring to talk about primarily, but also super subjective.
I mean, quality is expected, to be honest with you. That should be something that's out, especially for brands. I'm like, you don't sell quality. You sell the stories. And I didn't want to cut you off, but that's an interesting segue, because that's the latter half of the question. Because I always talk about branding. That's one of the things as a veteran 25-year photographer, people don't understand the value of what you were just saying, are the stories. I want you to continue, because let's keep pulling the thread on that. But I'm going to come back to what I was trying to say anyway. But I just want to stop because that's a very important point.
So my brand and the Latina Media Co brand is about what's important. Yeah. Why does something matter? If we're going to talk about, I don't know, Hintified on Netflix. What is important about it? What's different? What's new? Both in terms of what is inside the thing itself, what stories it's telling, but then also the conversation around it. Like, why didn't Netflix market the second season of Hintified? And so nobody heard about it, and then they had to cancel the show afterwards because no one watched it because they didn't market it.
Shit happens all the time. Drives me nuts. I know.
Right. So let's talk about that. What matters? What is the political implication? What does this piece of art have to say about our society, about where we are, about what we're thinking? And then what does the conversation around it also have to say about those things? So that is what I am looking for, and that's what I'm interested in. And it's maybe a little bit different. And sometimes people get upset about it. But I think those conversations can be really important, and it can be done in such a way where I'm calling folks to be better, as I mentioned, right? Yeah. Like sometimes people make mistakes, and if you come from a place of honesty and like, look, I think you messed up here, you can do better, I believe in you, you can encourage folks to do that. Sometimes people hear that message and sometimes they don't, but you can only do what you can do. And sometimes it's speaking truth to power, saying, Steven Spielberg, I appreciate you in many ways, but maybe we don't need another West Side Story by another white guy. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe not.
I have to agree with you. There's some perspectives. You see directors trying to write. Listen, I'll give them an A for a valiant effort, but I would love to see a director who endured that type of upgrading. And I don't care if you're black, white, Latino, Hispanic. I need somebody to tell the story from an authentic point of view. I don't care how much information, how much recon you've done. It's not the same. I could sit here and talk to you about, mira, lo vi le mamo como un tamalito on Tuesday. You know, we have a custom. You know, it's coming from here, from the heart and from our culture. So I completely understand exactly what you're saying. But I'm not going to shun those that at least make an attempt to try to tell the story. I just wish that more people, you know, would have the courage to say, wait a second, I have an amazing culture. I have an amazing life. I've been through some epic shit that I need to just share. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. This is such, you know, things happen serendipitously and they flow. You know, when you're in a flow of a conversation, they just go where they need to go. Almost like today when you told me, I wish I saw the movie Flux when I started. And I'm like, listen, divine time is a beautiful thing. We're going to have our time. You know, that's why I don't rush greatness. I've always said, Cristina, that communication isn't just about being heard. We just identified that, right? But it's about being felt. You know, I always say that it's not what they say when you're there in front of them. It's what people say when you're not present, right? And when you speak, Cristina, I can feel it. You know, I felt it that day, which is why you're on the show. So what's your secret for making sure, I'm asking you because you're a writer, especially you've written for some reputable publications, right? So just what's your secret for making sure that your message lands? Not just as information though, but impact. That's where the saucy stuff is.
Oh, that's a great question. You know, we do a lot of guiding of folks at Latina Media Co, where we publish a lot of Latinas. It's their first byline. So if you have listeners out there who've always wanted to write about movies, TV, books, podcasts, and share their perspectives, you know, I encourage you to pitch folks, try to get that perspective out there. And what I do when I guide folks is I think about, what is your argument? Like, what is the main thing you are trying to say? And again, it can't be, I liked this movie because, you know.
Fluff. I hate that shit. Yeah.
I mean, go tell your partner or your friends, but like nobody else cares. Yeah. But maybe if you can say, this is what this community has to say about my community. This is what I learned from this. This is what's important about that. Then yes, that's something that we might want to publish and think about. But once you have that argument, have you made it so that every sentence, every phrase that you've put together is in support of that argument? You know, sometimes when people are writing about movies and TV, they want to put in like a really long plot summary. And I was like, I don't care. Get this out of here. Nobody wants this.
Let's edit that out.
Yeah, give me one sentence so that then you can talk about your argument and then use specific examples from the piece that you're working on to support your argument. And so for me, that's part of it, is being really crystal clear about what I'm trying to say and how I can support what my argument, right? My thesis, my point, making sure everything backs up and lines up and then goes forward from there. The other thing I would try to say also is, I write about movies and TV. It's not that serious. Like,
I get it.
I do think that they shape culture and they have huge political implications, and that there is a big importance in them in terms of shaping how people see themselves and see others. So it's not that it's total fluff, but it's also that it's movies and TV. And so I try to approach it with a lightness, with a bit of humor, with certainly joy. You know, what is the experience you want? What is the energy you want? And can you have that? And can you push it out? I want to say too, I work in a lot of different things, but when I write something, even though it is hard, I almost always come away energized. I can't write before bed because then I can't sleep for hours. Because
that's the way it should be. That's your passion coming out, right?
Yeah, it's my passion. And so I'm doing it, right? Like, nobody gave me permission. I'm doing it. And I think you can feel that when you read my work, that it's something that I love. So again, like, build on your strength, whatever it is, go do that thing. And people will be able to see and feel the love and the joy and the energy that you bring to it.
Yeah, because you can't make that shit up. You know, when I speak or when I sing, I never even considered myself, you know, a good singer. I'm more of an entertainer. And what you were saying before, I always approach series because I could sit down and just completely binge watch a series because I have to remain impartial because I'm like, this is my escape. I've got to enjoy this. I can't start bringing in and imparting my political views and religious views because I don't do that anyway. So sometimes when I watch TV, I'll have to bite my tongue. I'm like, nope. I'm not going to say it. It's cool. It's just entertaining. So let me remain calm and impartial. So, that's definitely one of the things I'm still working on. So, but anyway, Cristina, I have to tell you, this was such it's a powerful conversation and I'm glad we're having it. And I'm sure it's going to open up some ears, some ideas. Hopefully, perhaps that's my intention. But I also want people to continue this conversation with you, off this episode and read further about you. So how can people find you? More importantly, is there anything else that you would like to boast about or advertise, plug, whatever that can help you in your organizations? Because we here at the VIP Voice would love to assist you in any way that we can. We're a community of voices. And listen, if it's going to encourage people to speak up and speak out, then I'm all for it. I'm here for it, as they would say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that and for having me here. So
absolutely.
Folks can find me at C. Escobar Andrade. That's the full Latina name.
And you got to roll the R's too, people, or else it doesn't work.
C. Escobar Andrade. That's where I'm at on Instagram. That's the one I'm on the most. I also suggest you follow Latina Media Co. on Instagram as well. And we're online at latinamedia.co. Follow us, subscribe. We have a Patreon and we've got new goodies coming out that way. So awesome. Absolutely check us out. And I want to say what we're doing is really building a community of people who care about media, who care about representation, who care about a just world where everybody has a chance to tell their own story and evaluate it. And we're doing that in such a way where we're coming together. We're having some hard conversations. We're having a lot of really joyous, fun, supportive conversations as well. We're sharing recommendations. We're sharing what we care about, what we like, what we don't like. And so, come play, come join us.
I love that. If that's not an invitation, I don't know what is, guys. There it is. There are your words of encouragement for the one and only Cristina Escobar. Thank you once again for sharing your insights, your knowledge, your experiences, and, opening up the doors to people who have great ideas. Because we all have that $1 million idea, but we need to have the chutzpah, as my Jewish community would say, to get it out there. So yes, and we definitely have to certainly do this again. And once again, we here at the VIP Voice appreciate your time, Cristina. You've been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun.
Yes. And don't worry, I'm going to put all this information in the show notes so people can actually find the links and click on it. And I'll take care of you. This has been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the VIP Voice podcast. If today's episode resonated, we'd love for you to leave a quick review. It really helps spread the word. And if you're a speaker, entertainer, entrepreneur, or industry professional with a story to share, we're always on the lookout for inspiring guests who align with our mission. So drop us a message at info@mannycabo.com. Let's keep building a community of powerful voices. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.